I am Erika, 32 years old, a graphic designer from Boston, with an eye for details that most overlook. Last Sunday started like any monthly family dinner should: warm conversation and mother's signature pot roast. Nobody could have predicted how it would end. When my parents pulled me aside after dessert to tell me I would ruin their special trip to Italy because I was too different now. After my recent divorce and career change, I was apparently disposable. I clinked my fork to my glass and simply said, "Duly noted." They had no idea what was coming. Where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe to see how I turned my family's rejection into the perfect Italian revenge. Family dinners at my parents' suburban colonial in Wellesley were as consistent as the seasons. Every last Sunday of the month, Martha and Robert Anderson gathered their 3 children and respective families for pot roast, small talk, and thinly veiled judgments. I was the middle child, sandwiched between James, the golden firstborn, who followed Dad into law, and Patrick, the baby, who became a successful surgeon. Both had picture-perfect spouses and children, who my mother paraded around at church functions like living trophies. Our family had certain traditions that were practically sacred. Chief among them was our annual European vacation. Since we were teenagers, my parents had taken us abroad every summer, starting with London and Paris, before venturing to more exotic destinations. Italy was their favorite, a place they spoke about with reverence, usually reserved for religious experiences. The family dynamics had shifted dramatically in the past year. 8 months ago, I finalized my divorce from Thomas, my husband of 8 years. We had simply grown apart, becoming strangers sharing the same address rather than partners. There was no dramatic betrayal, just the quiet death of love and the mutual acknowledgement that we wanted different futures. After the divorce, I made changes my family considered radical. I left my stable but soul-crushing job in corporate finance to pursue graphic design, my college passion I had abandoned for practicality. I colored my naturally blonde hair a deep auburn with purple undertones. I got a small tattoo of a phoenix on my wrist, symbolizing my rebirth. Small changes that made me feel alive again, but apparently transformed me into someone my family barely recognized. The drive to my parents' house that Sunday was filled with a strange mixture of dread and hope. Maybe this dinner would be different. Maybe they would finally see that I was happier now than I had been in years. The late April air carried the scent of blooming magnolias as I parked my Subaru behind my brother James's Tesla and Patrick's Range Rover. "Erika, you made it!" my mother called from the front porch, her voice carrying the forced enthusiasm she reserved for situations that made her uncomfortable. Her eyes lingered a moment too long on my hair before she pulled me into a stiff hug. Inside the house was immaculate as always. Family photos lined the walls, chronologically arranged to showcase the Anderson family journey. I noticed that several recent photos included Thomas, but none featured me alone after the divorce. "You changed your hair again," my father commented flatly as he handed me a glass of white wine. Robert Anderson was a man of few words, each one carefully measured for maximum impact. "Just a refresh," I replied, determined to keep things light. "The salon said the purple brings out my eyes." My father merely nodded, already turning his attention to James, who had just arrived with his wife Samantha and their 2 children Emma and Noah. Perfect little family in their coordinated pastel outfits like they had stepped out of a catalog photo shoot. "Grandpa!" Emma squealed, running into my father's waiting arms. His face transformed genuine joy, replacing the tight smile he had offered me. Patrick arrived last with his pregnant wife, Megan. They were expecting their first child, a boy they planned to name Robert after my father. The perfect tribute to ensure another generation of Anderson legacy. "How are the house renovations going?" my mother asked Patrick while arranging fresh flowers in a crystal vase. "On schedule for once. The nursery will be done just in time," he replied, his hand protectively resting on Megan's rounded belly. "And the partnership track?" my father asked James, who launched into a detailed account of his latest courtroom victory. No one asked about my life, my new freelance design business, my recently leased studio space downtown, the art class I had started teaching at the community center, were all deemed unworthy of inquiry. Dinner proceeded with the usual choreography. My mother served her famous pot roast with roasted potatoes and spring vegetables. Wine flowed freely except for Megan, who sipped sparkling water. Conversation danced around safe topics like the unseasonably warm weather neighborhood gossip and my niece's dance recital. The first indication something was amiss came during dessert. My parents kept exchanging meaningful glances, a silent conversation happening over apple pie and coffee. James seemed unusually interested in his dessert plate, avoiding eye contact entirely. Patrick looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his napkin. "The tiramisu in Florence is simply divine," my mother remarked suddenly. "We must go back to that little cafe near the Duomo when we're there next month." "Absolutely," my father agreed. "And the wine tour in Tuscany is confirmed for Thursday. They have a special vertical tasting prepared." I perked up at this. "The Italy trip is next month already. I should check my calendar to request time off." The annual family vacation had become complicated with adult children and their own careers, but we typically planned far in advance. Another loaded glance passed between my parents. "Shall we have coffee in the study, Erika?" my mother asked, already standing. "Robert, would you join us?" The study had always been the location for serious conversations in our family. It was where my father announced he was paying for our college educations, where my mother told us about her cancer scare 5 years ago, and where they confronted James about his brief college experimentation with marijuana. My stomach tightened as I followed them down the hallway past the family photos that documented our perfectly curated lives. The study door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded ominous. My father took his usual position behind the mahogany desk, while my mother perched on the leather love seat, patting the space beside her in invitation. I remained standing, suddenly feeling like a defendant awaiting sentencing. "Erika, dear," my mother began, her voice taking on the gentle tone she used when delivering bad news. "About the Italy trip next month. Your father and I have been talking, and we feel that perhaps this year might not be the best time for you to join us." The words hung in the air between us, their meaning not fully registering at first. "Not join you? I don't understand," I replied, genuinely confused. "We always go together. It's our family tradition." My father cleared his throat, straightening papers on his desk that were already perfectly aligned. "The thing is, Erika, this trip is special. We have certain expectations for how we want it to go. Next week is just special." My mother echoed, her manicured fingers nervously twisting her pearl necklace. "You being there would ruin that." The bluntness of her statement hit me like a physical blow. I took an involuntary step backward, my legs bumping against an antique side table. "Ruin it? How would I ruin your trip?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, unnaturally high. My father's expression hardened. "You're too different now, Erika. The purple hair, the tattoo, quitting a perfectly good job to draw pictures. It's not what we had in mind for our Italian vacation." "What you had in mind? It's a family trip. I'm your daughter. What exactly did you have in mind that I would ruin?" The hurt was rapidly transforming into anger, heat rising to my cheeks. My mother sighed, exchanging another glance with my father. "We want to introduce the Blackwells to Italian culture. You know Thomas's parents." The floor seemed to shift beneath me. "Thomas's parents? My ex-husband's parents are going instead of me." "Thomas is still coming too," my father added, as if this would somehow make the revelation less shocking. "He's always fit so well with the family, and the Blackwells have never been to Europe. It's a good opportunity for networking with Jeffrey's firm as well." "You're taking my ex-husband and his parents to Italy instead of me," I repeated, unable to process the betrayal unfolding before me. My mother stood and approached, reaching for my hand, which I instinctively pulled away. "Darling, Thomas still feels like family. He understands our values, our traditions. He fits in. And I don't." The question came out as barely more than a whisper. "This new version of you," my father gestured vaguely at my appearance, "seems to be going through some sort of phase. The hair, the career change, the whole divorced woman rebellion thing. It's not what we want to present to the Blackwells." I felt dizzy with disbelief. "A phase? I'm 32 years old, Dad. These changes weren't impulsive. I thought about them for years before acting. I'm finally becoming the person I want to be." "And that person doesn't quite fit with our family image," my mother said softly, as if delivering a regrettable but unchangeable truth. "Perhaps once you've settled down again, found a new direction." "I have a direction," I insisted. My design business is already profitable. I'm happier than I've been in years. Drawing logos for coffee shops isn't exactly a career, Erika. My father scoffed. And happiness isn't everything. Stability, tradition, respectability, those matter too. We just think it's best if you sit this trip out, my mother concluded, reaching for the door handle. Give yourself time to work through this adjustment period. I stood frozen, processing their words. The casual cruelty of their exclusion was breathtaking. As the shock began to fade, a question formed. Does everyone else know about this decision? I asked. My father nodded. We discussed it with your brothers last week. They understand our reasoning. Of course they did. James and Patrick, the sons who never stepped out of line, never questioned the Anderson family blueprint for success. They had known about this ambush dinner all along. We returned to the dining room where an uncomfortable silence had fallen. James studied his coffee with intense concentration, while Patrick at least had the decency to look ashamed. I walked calmly to my place at the table, picked up my water glass, and clinked it gently with my fork. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. Duly noted, I said, looking each family member in the eye. Thank you for dinner. I need to head home. No one tried to stop me as I gathered my coat and purse. No one followed me to the door. No one called after me as I walked to my car with perfectly measured steps, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. It was only when I was safely inside my car driving away from the house I grew up in that the tears came. They flowed freely down my cheeks as I navigated the familiar streets of my childhood, past the elementary school where I had once felt so safe, past the ice cream shop, where we celebrated good report cards, past the park where my father had taught me to ride a bicycle. With each mile, the sadness began to harden into something else, something with edges. The drive home became a journey through memories, each one taking on new meaning in light of my parents' rejection. Traffic lights blurred through my tears as I remembered childhood incidents I had long dismissed as insignificant. My 8th grade art show where my watercolor had won first place. My parents had arrived late and left early, citing James's debate tournament the next day as more important. Patrick's science fair projects always warranted full family attendance, even when scheduled at inconvenient times. High school graduation, where my father's toast had focused on how surprised they were that I had maintained a 4.0 GPA given my creative temperament. The backhanded compliment had stung, but I had laughed it off. College acceptance letters, when my choice to study graphic design at RISD instead of business at my father's alma mater had triggered weeks of silent treatment. I eventually added a business minor to appease them, delaying my graduation by a semester and adding to my student loan debt. My first apartment in Boston's South End, which my mother had declared bohemian with a wrinkled nose code for disapproval. When I proudly showed them my first professional logo design for a local brewery, my father had asked when I planned to get a real job. Their palpable relief when I started dating Thomas, a financial analyst with the right pedigree and conservative values. The wedding they largely controlled, overruling my simpler vision for a formal country club affair, more to their taste. Their not-so-subtle pressure about grandchildren despite knowing we had fertility issues. The disappointment poorly masked when month after month, year after year, no pregnancy announcement came. The most devastating betrayal had come during my divorce. While I had expected my parents to support me through the painful process, they had instead maintained their relationship with Thomas. My mother still invited him to Sunday dinners when I couldn't attend. My father still played golf with him at the country club. I pulled into the parking garage beneath my apartment building, mind racing. This Italy situation wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of conditional love and impossible standards. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and headed straight for my laptop. I needed to verify something. I logged into my email and searched for Italy itinerary. There it was, the detailed travel plans I had helped arrange months ago. As the family's most tech-savvy member, I had become the de facto travel planner years ago. I researched destinations, booked accommodations, arranged transportation, and created detailed itineraries for each trip. My parents contributed their credit card and general preferences, but the logistical heavy lifting had been my responsibility. For this year's Italy trip, I had outdone myself. 2 weeks exploring Rome, Florence, Tuscany, and the Amalfi Coast. Boutique hotels with terrace views, private guided tours of the Vatican and Uffizi, a cooking class in a Tuscan villa, wine tastings at exclusive vineyards, a sunset cruise along the Amalfi coastline, all meticulously planned and paid for with my parents' platinum card, which I was an authorized user on specifically for family travel arrangements. As I scrolled through the confirmations, another realization hit me. The reservations I had made months ago were for 6 adults, my parents, my 2 brothers, and their wives. Not 7 or 9, which would have included me or Thomas and his parents. They had planned to exclude me from the beginning, asking me to arrange a vacation I was never intended to join. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucia, my best friend since college, and the only person who truly understood my complicated family dynamics. "How was dinner from hell?" she asked. I typed back, "Worse than usual. Can I call you?" Within seconds, my phone rang. Lucia's voice was warm and familiar, instantly comforting. "What happened?" she asked without preamble. I recounted the evening's events, my voice breaking several times as I described my parents' casual cruelty. "They're taking Thomas and his parents to Italy instead of me," I concluded, the reality still feeling surreal. "They planned it months ago while having me make all the arrangements. They said I would ruin their special trip because I'm too different now." "Those manipulative assholes," Lucia fumed, her outrage on my behalf somehow validating. "And your brothers just sat there. They knew all along. Apparently there was a family meeting last week that I wasn't invited to." "Erika, I know they're your family, but this is emotional abuse. You've spent your whole life trying to earn their approval while they keep moving the goalposts." Her words resonated in a way they never had before. I had always defended my family's behavior, making excuses for their criticism and dismissiveness. But this explicit rejection was impossible to rationalize away. "What are you going to do?" Lucia asked after a moment of silence. The question hung in the air as I stared at my laptop screen, still displaying the Italy itinerary I had so carefully crafted. "I'm not sure yet," I replied slowly, an idea beginning to form. "But I think it's time I stopped being their doormat." After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time contemplating my next move. I opened a folder on my computer labeled Family Travel and began reviewing every detail of the upcoming Italy trip. I had access to all the accounts because I had created them. Hotel reservations, train tickets, museum passes, tour bookings, rental car confirmation. Every aspect of their perfect vacation existed in digital form, controlled by passwords I had established. A sense of calm clarity washed over me. For once in my life, I had power in this relationship. They might be able to exclude me from their special trip, but not without consequences. The digital glow of my laptop screen illuminated my apartment as midnight approached. A glass of Cabernet sat half-empty beside me, fortifying my resolve as I systematically dismantled my family's Italian vacation. I started with the hotels. The boutique gem in Trastevere with its ivy-covered courtyard and rooftop bar overlooking Rome. The renovated palazzo in Florence with frescoed ceilings and marble bathrooms. The cliffside retreat on the Amalfi coast where each suite had a private infinity pool. With a few clicks, I canceled each reservation, making sure to select the non-refundable option. The cancellation emails would go to my account, not theirs. As far as they knew, their accommodations were still confirmed. Next came the transportation. The first-class train tickets between cities, the private car service from Naples to Positano, the Vespa rentals in Tuscany, all canceled. The Eurail passes I had purchased as a backup were electronically locked, requiring a PIN they didn't have. Tours and experiences followed. The after-hours Vatican tour that had required pulling strings and paying a premium. The private cooking class with a Michelin-starred chef in his Tuscan home. The chartered yacht for cruising the Amalfi coastline. One by one, I removed these carefully selected experiences from their itinerary. I saved their flights for last. I couldn't cancel them without immediate notification, but I could change their seat assignments to the worst possible options, middle seats in different rows scattered throughout the plane. I also removed their meal preferences and special requests. For the final touch, I changed all the account passwords and removed my own contact information as the group organizer. When issues arose, as they inevitably would, the customer service agents would have no authorized person to speak with. As I worked, I felt a mixture of vindication and grief. This wasn't who I wanted to be, a person who took pleasure in others' misfortune. But years of subtle abuse had culminated in this explicit rejection, and something in me had finally snapped. I closed my laptop around 2 in the morning, physically and emotionally exhausted. Despite the late hour, I wasn't finished. I opened my phone's browser and navigated to an airline website. If my family was going to Italy without me, perhaps it was time for me to experience Italy on my own terms. I booked a one-way ticket to Rome, departing the same day as my family, but on a different airline. I reserved a small apartment in each city on their itinerary, scheduling myself to be in the same locations, but in completely different accommodations. I would be invisible to them, but present, a ghost following their doomed vacation. The final cost was significant, nearly depleting my savings, but the psychological satisfaction seemed worth every penny. For once, I was choosing myself over my family's approval. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I fell into bed as dawn light began filtering through my blinds, sleeping dreamlessly for a few hours, before waking to the insistent buzz of my phone. It was Sunday morning text check-ins from my brother's wives, a ritual that had developed over the past year. Samantha and Megan sending nearly identical messages, inquiring about my well-being, while never acknowledging the family dynamics that necessitated such performative concern. I ignored the texts and made coffee, rehearsing in my mind how the next few weeks would unfold. My family wouldn't discover what I had done until they arrived at the airport check-in counter in 10 days. By then, I would already be on my way to Rome, unreachable and unapologetic. The day passed in a strange limbo as I alternated between doubt and determination. Had I gone too far? Was I becoming the bitter, vindictive person my parents seemed to think I already was? Around sunset, I made a decision to give them one last chance. I called my mother's cell phone, my heart pounding as it rang. "Erika, is everything all right?" Her voice carried more surprise than concern. "I wanted to talk about yesterday," I said carefully. "About the Italy trip." "Oh, darling, I hoped you'd understand once you had time to think about it. It's really for the best." "Is it? Because it feels like I'm being punished for finally living authentically." A heavy sigh came through the line. "This isn't punishment, Erika. It's just, your father and I have a certain vision for this trip, and your current lifestyle choices don't align with that vision." "My lifestyle choices? You mean my divorce, my career, my hair color?" "All of it, dear. The Blackwells are very traditional, and we want to make a good impression. Thomas has always understood the importance of appearances." The casual cruelty of her words extinguished any remaining doubt about my plan. "I see. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful time," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "Thank you for understanding, darling. Perhaps next year, if things have settled." We said our goodbyes, and I sat motionless for several minutes, phone still in hand. There would be no next year. The relationship had fundamentally changed, and there was no going back. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time since the family dinner. In 10 days, I would board a plane to Italy, leaving behind the version of myself that sought approval I would never receive. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also freedom. It was time to embrace both. The departure date arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine streaming through wispy clouds as my Uber approached Logan International Airport. I imagined my family across town at the international terminal, confident in their meticulously planned itinerary, blissfully unaware of what awaited them. My own check-in process went smoothly. I had packed light, one carry-on suitcase and a tote bag containing my sketchbook tablet and travel essentials. The minimalist approach felt symbolic of my new beginning, unburdened by excess baggage, both literal and emotional. As I settled at my gate with an overpriced airport coffee, I switched my phone off airplane mode one last time. Almost immediately, it exploded with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, and voicemails, all from family members. It had begun. James's text came first, characteristically demanding, "Unblock the account now. Mom and Dad can't check in." I smiled as I typed my reply. "Sorry, I'm too different to help. Ask my ex-husband." Patrick's message followed, more measured but equally urgent. Erika, the airline has no record of seat assignments, and the hotel in Rome says our reservation was canceled. Do you know what's happening? I didn't respond to him directly, instead sending a family group text. Hope you all have a special time in Italy with the Blackwells. Safe travels. My phone immediately rang my mother's ringtone. I declined the call and switched to voicemail playback. Erika Anderson. My mother's voice was tightly controlled but vibrating with anger. Whatever you've done to our travel arrangements, you need to fix it immediately. We are standing at the check-in counter looking like fools. This childish behavior is exactly why we were concerned about your participation in the first place. Delete. Erika, it's Dad. My father's message was clipped businesslike. There seems to be some technical issue with our reservations. Since you handled the bookings, the airline needs to speak with you directly. Call me back immediately. Delete. 3 more messages followed, increasingly desperate as my family realized the extent of what I had done. My mother's voice shifted from angry to pleading. My father threatened financial consequences. James mentioned something about legal implications. I deleted them all and turned off my phone as boarding began for my flight. The 8-hour journey to Rome passed in a blur of mediocre meals, half-watched movies, and fitful sleep. I used the time to sketch in my travel journal, drafting logos for my growing client list and jotting down thoughts about my evolving self-image. By the time we landed at Fiumicino Airport, I felt simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. The eternal city awaited, and for the first time in my life, I would experience it on my own terms, without family commentary or predetermined itineraries. After clearing customs, I turned my phone back on to arrange transportation to my apartment. The notifications had multiplied exponentially. 97 text messages, 42 missed calls, 29 voicemails. I scrolled through the texts, quickly getting a sense of the unfolding drama. My family had been denied boarding initially due to seat assignment discrepancies. After sorting that out with considerable difficulty, they had flown to Rome only to discover their hotel had no record of their reservation. The Eurail passes were locked, requiring a PIN they didn't have. Every tour and experience had been canceled. James was apoplectic, threatening legal action against the travel companies and me personally. My mother had apparently broken down in tears at the hotel lobby, causing a scene that mortified my father. Patrick seemed torn between family loyalty and a growing realization that perhaps I had been provoked. The most interesting development was a text from Patrick sent just an hour earlier. I don't condone what you did, but I understand why you did it. They've been unfair to you for years. Thomas and his parents went home, by the way. This trip is a disaster. I felt a twinge of satisfaction knowing the Blackwells had abandoned ship at the first sign of trouble. So much for their treasured family connection. As my taxi navigated Rome's chaotic streets toward my rented apartment in the Monte district, I composed a single reply to Patrick. I hope someday they understand that actions have consequences. I'm sorry you got caught in the crossfire, but I'm not sorry I finally stood up for myself. The apartment was exactly as advertised, a small but charming space with terracotta floors, whitewashed walls, and a tiny balcony overlooking a picturesque alleyway. After showering and changing, I ventured out into the warm Roman afternoon, ready to begin my solo adventure. Over the next few days, I immersed myself in the city, visiting the major sites, but also wandering aimlessly down cobblestone streets, discovering hidden piazzas and neighborhood cafes. I sketched the Colosseum at sunrise before the crowds arrived. I tossed a coin into the Trevi fountain, wishing not for a return to Rome, but for continued courage in my new life. My phone continued to accumulate messages, which I mostly ignored. My parents had apparently salvaged some semblance of their trip by throwing money at the problem, securing last-minute accommodations and transportation at premium prices. According to Patrick, the atmosphere was tense, with my father vacillating between rage and resignation. On my 4th day in Rome, as I sat sketching in a small cafe near the Pantheon, my phone displayed an incoming call from Patrick. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "I know where you are," he said without preamble. "Your location is showing in the Family Share app. You're in Rome." I had forgotten about the app installed years ago during another family trip and never deleted. "Yes, I'm in Rome," I confirmed, seeing no reason to deny it. "That's actually kind of brilliant," Patrick said, and I was surprised to hear a note of admiration in his voice. Mom and Dad are losing their minds. They keep saying they don't understand how you could do this to them after all they've done for you. That's the problem, Patrick. They've never seen how they've hurt me. This is the first time they've experienced consequences for their behavior. A long pause followed. I think I get it now, he finally said. I saw the emails. The ones where you arranged this entire trip months ago for 6 people, none of them you. That's pretty messed up asking you to plan your own exclusion. It was the final straw. I agreed, sipping my espresso and watching tourists photograph the ancient temple across the piazza. Where are you heading next? He asked. Florence tomorrow, then Tuscany, then Amalfi. The original itinerary just without all of you. Another pause. Can we meet somewhere? Just you and me, I'd like to talk in person. The request surprised me. Patrick and I had never been particularly close, both of us orbiting James the sun around which the Anderson family revolved. Why? I asked, suspicious. Because I think I need to apologize and I'd rather not do it over the phone. Florence greeted me with Renaissance splendor and unexpected redemption. The train from Rome arrived at Santa Maria Novella station under clear blue skies, the perfect backdrop for the city's terracotta rooftops and majestic Duomo visible even from the platform. My apartment in Florence was larger than the Rome rental located in a renovated medieval building near the Ponte Vecchio. The interior was a tasteful blend of historic elements, exposed wooden beams, stone walls, and modern furnishings. A small kitchen window offered a glimpse of the Arno River glittering in the afternoon sun. After settling in, I headed to the Accademia Gallery, where I had booked a ticket to see Michelangelo's David. Standing before the towering marble masterpiece, I was struck by how vulnerable yet determined he appeared, poised at the moment before confronting Goliath. I felt a kinship with that expression, the mixture of fear and resolve that comes with standing up to a seemingly insurmountable opponent. I sketched for nearly an hour, capturing details of the statue from different angles, losing myself in the meditative process until my phone vibrated with a text from Patrick. Just arrived in Florence. Still want to meet, I'm near Santa Croce. We arranged to meet at a small cafe in Piazza Santa Croce, away from the major tourist flows, but public enough that I felt comfortable with the encounter. I spotted Patrick before he saw me looking uncharacteristically casual in jeans and a linen shirt, instead of his usual Brooks Brothers attire. You look different, I said as I approached his table. He smiled ruefully. Good different or bad different? Just different. More relaxed. That's definitely good then. He gestured to the chair across from him. Thanks for meeting me. The waiter appeared and we both ordered espresso and sparkling water, falling into an awkward silence after he departed. So, Patrick finally began. This isn't how any of us expected this trip to go. No, it isn't. I agreed. But then I wasn't expected to be part of it at all. He winced. I deserved that. Look, Erika, I owe you an apology. I should have said something when Mom and Dad decided to exclude you. I should have stood up for you. Why didn't you? I asked, not accusingly but with genuine curiosity. Patrick sighed, running a hand through his hair. The same reason I never stand up to them. It's easier to go along to be the son they want me to be. It's a path of least resistance thing. I tried that path for 30 years, Patrick. It nearly erased me. Our coffees arrived, providing a brief reprieve from the intensity of the conversation. I know, he said after taking a sip. I've been watching you disappear for years, becoming smaller and quieter at every family gathering. Then suddenly you divorce Thomas, change careers, dye your hair purple, and it was like seeing a completely different person emerge. Not different, I corrected him. Authentic. That's the real me, the one I've been suppressing to fit the Anderson mold. Patrick nodded slowly. I envy that courage. Do you know why I went into medicine? The question surprised me. Because you wanted to help people. He laughed, a short, harsh sound. Because Dad said law was James's territory, and a doctor in the family would round out the portfolio. I wanted to study music. This revelation stunned me. I had no idea. No one does. Megan doesn't even know. I play piano when no one's home, classical pieces I have to hide like they're pornography. His voice was bitter, but his eyes revealed a deeper pain. It's never too late to change direction, I offered. Look at me. You're braver than I am, always have been. He glanced around the picturesque piazza, the ancient church facade looming over the cafe tables. Can I ask you something? Did you come to Italy to follow us? To watch the chaos unfold? I considered the question carefully. Initially, yes. It was about proving a point showing that I could take back control. But now that I'm here, it's become something else. It's about reclaiming experiences on my own terms, seeing these places through my own eyes instead of worrying about everyone else's reactions. That sounds liberating, Patrick said wistfully. It is. Terrifying, too. We talked for hours, connecting in a way we never had before. Patrick revealed more about his own struggles with our parents' expectations, his doubts about the path he'd chosen, his fear that fatherhood would transform him into a replica of our father. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the piazza, I asked the question that had been nagging at me. Where are Mom and Dad now? And James? They managed to book a villa outside the city. Dad threw money at the problem until it went away as usual. James and Samantha are with them. I told them I needed some space, got my own hotel room. He hesitated. They don't know I'm meeting you. What will you tell them? Patrick shrugged. The truth, probably. That's another thing I admire about you, Erika. You've stopped living in fear of their disapproval. As we prepared to part ways, Patrick surprised me with an impulsive hug. I'm proud of you, sis, for what it's worth. It's worth a lot, I replied, finding myself unexpectedly emotional. More than you know. We agreed to meet again in Positano the following week, a secret alliance forming between the family rebels. As I watched Patrick walk away across the ancient piazza, I felt something I hadn't experienced in relation to my family in years' hope. The remainder of my time in Florence unfolded with unexpected joy. I visited the Uffizi Gallery sketching Botticelli's Venus for hours. I wandered through the Boboli gardens, finding inspiration in the sculptured hedges and hidden fountains. I discovered a small art supply store near the Duomo and purchased handmade papers and Italian inks. It was in this shop that I met Sophia, a curator at a local contemporary art gallery, who was purchasing supplies for an upcoming exhibition. She noticed my sketches and struck up a conversation that continued over dinner at a tiny restaurant in the Oltrarno district. Sophia was everything I admired: intelligent, confident, passionate about art, and completely comfortable in her own skin. As we shared a bottle of Chianti and swapped stories, I found myself opening up about my family situation and the circumstances that had brought me to Italy alone. So you canceled their entire vacation? Sophia asked, her dark eyes widening. That is what we Italians call vendetta perfetta, perfect revenge. It wasn't my proudest moment, I admitted, but it felt necessary. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Sometimes we must cause a little chaos to create the space for new growth. Like a forest fire, it seems destructive, but it allows for regeneration. Her perspective helped ease the lingering guilt I felt about my actions. We exchanged contact information before parting with plans to meet again when I returned to Florence on my way back to Rome. The Tuscan countryside was next on my itinerary, a rented Fiat, and a small agriturismo farmhouse outside Siena, serving as my base for exploring the rolling hills and medieval villages of the region. I spent mornings sketching vineyards and cypress-lined roads, afternoons visiting local wineries, and evenings writing in my journal on the farmhouse terrace, the golden hour light turning the landscape into a Renaissance painting. It was during this peaceful interlude that I received an unexpected email from my father. The subject line read simply, "We need to talk." The message itself was brief and uncharacteristically vulnerable. Erika, what you did was unacceptable, but I'm beginning to understand that our behavior toward you has been equally unacceptable for many years. When you're ready, I would like to have a conversation. Your mother is not ready yet. Neither is James. But I am. Dad. I read the email multiple times, searching for hidden anger or manipulation, but finding none. It was the first time in my adult life that my father had acknowledged any wrongdoing on his part. I decided not to respond immediately, giving myself time to process this unexpected development. As I continued my journey to the Amalfi Coast, winding along the breathtaking coastline to Positano, I found myself at a crossroads in more ways than one. The revenge that had seemed so satisfying initially had evolved into something more complex, a catalyst for change, not just in my life, but potentially in my family's as well. Positano cascaded down the cliffside in a riot of pastel colors, the Mediterranean stretching endlessly blue beyond the village's iconic beach. My apartment here was the most charming, yet a converted fisherman's house, with a terrace overlooking the sea bougainvillea, spilling over whitewashed walls in vivid purple blooms that matched my hair. I had been in Italy for nearly 2 weeks now, and the transformation was evident not just in my sketchbook filled with increasingly confident drawings, but in my demeanor. I carried myself differently, made decisions without second-guessing, engaged with strangers without worrying about their judgment. The constant background hum of anxiety that had accompanied family interactions had faded to a barely perceptible whisper. Patrick and I met for dinner at a seafood restaurant perched on the hillside where tables were set on different levels of a terraced garden, each with unobstructed views of the sunset over the water. "You look incredible," he said as I joined him. "There's something different about you." "I feel different," I admitted. "Lighter somehow." We ordered a bottle of local white wine and fresh-caught sea bass as Patrick updated me on the family situation. My parents had salvaged what they could of their vacation, but the spontaneity and joy had been stripped away, replaced by rigid scheduling and lingering resentment. "James is still furious," Patrick reported. "He's talking about cutting you out of his children's lives, claiming you're a bad influence." I winced, but wasn't surprised. James had always been my father's perfect reflection, embracing the same rigid values and conditional love. "And Mom?" I asked, preparing myself for the worst. "Hurt? Confused? She keeps saying she doesn't understand why you would do something so vindictive, that she always tried to be a good mother to you." "She did try," I acknowledged. "But her version of good mothering was about shaping me into something acceptable, rather than accepting who I actually am." Patrick nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about how much of my life has been lived trying to be acceptable to them." He took a deep breath. "I told Megan I want to take piano lessons after the baby is born." "Patrick, that's wonderful." My face broke into a genuine smile. "How did she react?" "She was surprised but supportive. Said she'd always wondered why there wasn't more music in our house." He looked almost shy. "I played for her last night. Debussy." She cried. "I'm so proud of you," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "It's a small step compared to what you've done," he demurred. "It's not a competition. Every authentic choice matters." As the sky transformed into a watercolor blend of pink and gold, our conversation turned to the future. What would happen when we all returned to Boston? Could relationships be repaired, or had I burned bridges beyond reconstruction? "Dad asked me about you," Patrick said as our dessert arrived. "Wanted to know if you seemed happy, if you were doing okay on your own." "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that you seem more alive than I've ever seen you." He hesitated. He didn't say much, but he nodded like he was taking it in. "I think he's really trying to understand Erika." The thought of my father making an effort to see beyond his rigid worldview was almost impossible to imagine, yet Patrick's words gave me a flicker of hope. "Did you see his email to me?" I asked. Patrick shook his head. "He sent you an email. That's significant. Dad never initiates difficult conversations, especially in writing, where his words can be saved and used against him later." "It seemed genuine," I admitted, "but I'm scared to believe it." "Understandable. We've all been conditioned to expect the Anderson version of love, which comes with fine print and performance clauses." We laughed at his accurate assessment, the sound mingling with the gentle crash of waves below. As we parted ways that evening, Patrick hugged me again, this embrace longer and more confident than in Florence. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For breaking the spell, for showing me it's possible to step off the prescribed path and survive." He pulled back, eyes suspiciously bright. "Whatever happens with Mom and Dad, know that you've changed at least one Anderson for the better." The remaining days of my Italian journey passed with a dreamlike quality. I explored the winding paths of Positano, discovering hidden gardens and local artisans' workshops. I took a boat to Capri, swimming in the crystalline waters of the Blue Grotto. I hiked the path of the gods, sketching the breathtaking coastal panoramas from vertiginous heights. In each place, I collected not just images in my sketchbook, but fragments of a new identity, pieces of the woman I was becoming without the constant pressure to conform to family expectations. On my final night in Rome before flying back to Boston the next day, I sat at a small restaurant in Trastevere, sipping local wine and watching the vibrant street life. My phone lit up with a text from Sophia, wishing me safe travels and inviting me to return to Florence soon, with the promise of gallery introductions for my work. I smiled, realizing that in 3 short weeks, I had created more meaningful connections by being authentic than in years of careful people-pleasing. As I savored my last Italian meal, I finally composed a reply to my father's email. "I'm coming home tomorrow. I'm ready to talk when you are. But I need you to understand that I can't go back to being the daughter you thought you wanted. I can only be the daughter I actually am." His response came quickly. "I'm beginning to think that daughter might be even better than the one we imagined. Safe travels." It wasn't an apology, but from Robert Anderson, it was revolutionary. The Boston skyline emerged through wisps of cloud as the plane began its descent, familiar, yet somehow different after my time away. Or perhaps it was my perspective that had changed, viewing my hometown through newly confident eyes. My apartment welcomed me back with the comfortable silence of a space that belonged completely to me, decorated according to my taste, organized to suit my habits. I unpacked slowly, incorporating treasures from my travels: Italian stationery, a small watercolor set from Florence, a ceramic bowl from Positano painted in Mediterranean blue. After a long shower to wash away the stiffness of travel, I checked my phone to find an email from my mother. Unlike my father's concise message, hers was lengthy and emotional, a mixture of hurt, confusion, and tentative understanding. "While I cannot condone the way you chose to express your feelings," she wrote, "your father and I have been doing some difficult reflection. We may have been too rigid in our expectations, too focused on appearances rather than your happiness. If you're willing, we would like to meet and talk." She suggested dinner at a neutral location, a restaurant downtown rather than their home. The gesture was significant, acknowledging my need for equal footing rather than positioning me as the child returning to the family domain. I agreed to meet them the following week, giving myself time to readjust to Boston and prepare emotionally for what promised to be an intense encounter. The restaurant she chose was upscale but not pretentious, with widely spaced tables that allowed for privacy. I arrived first, deliberately selecting a table where no one would be backed into a corner. When my parents entered, I was struck by how ordinary they looked amid the other diners. Martha Anderson in her understated designer dress, Robert Anderson in his tailored suit, they had always seemed larger than life, the arbiters of all things proper and acceptable. Now they appeared almost small, uncertain as they approached. "Erika," my mother said, her voice lacking its usual authority. "Thank you for meeting us." My father nodded, his typical stoicism tempered by what seemed like genuine apprehension. After ordering drinks and navigating initial small talk about my flight and their eventual return from Italy, my mother broached the subject we were all thinking about. "What you did to our vacation was deeply hurtful," she began, fingers nervously adjusting her napkin. "Yes, it was," I agreed calmly. "It was meant to be." My father's eyebrows rose at my candor. "I wanted you to feel a fraction of the hurt I felt when you told me I would ruin your special trip, that I was too different to include in my own family." My voice remained steady, the words practiced during many Italian evenings. It wasn't an impulsive action. It was a deliberate response to years of being made to feel inadequate. "We never meant to make you feel inadequate," my mother protested. "Intention doesn't negate impact, Mom. You and Dad have been clear about your disappointment in my choices for as long as I can remember. My major, my career, my appearance, my divorce all met with criticism rather than support." My father cleared his throat. "We believed we were guiding you toward your best life." "No," I countered. "You were guiding me toward the life you wanted me to have. There's a difference." The waiter's arrival with our drinks provided a momentary reprieve from the tension. The Italy situation, my father said after taking a sip of his scotch, using the detached language of a lawyer, made us realize we may have been overly controlling. Your brother Patrick has been quite vocal about his perspective since returning. I smiled slightly, imagining Patrick finally speaking his truth. He's taking piano lessons, my mother added, sounding both bewildered and bemused. Says he's always wanted to play. Good for him, I replied. He deserves to pursue his passions. As do you, my father said, surprising me. Your graphic design work. Patrick showed us your website. The logos you created are quite impressive. Coming from Robert Anderson, this qualified as effusive praise. Thank you, I said simply. We're trying to understand Erika, my mother said, reaching across the table but stopping short of touching my hand. It's not easy to question the values that have guided our lives for so long, but we don't want to lose you. I don't want to be lost, I replied. But I can't keep contorting myself to fit expectations that leave no room for who I actually am. The conversation continued through dinner, sometimes tense, occasionally tearful, but marked by a new willingness to listen on all sides. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful group hug like in the movies. Instead, there was something more valuable, the first fragile shoots of authentic communication. We would like to try again, my father said as we waited for the check. Perhaps a family dinner next month, if you're willing. I'd like that, I said cautiously, but with some conditions. No comments about my appearance or career choices, no inviting my ex-husband. And I'd like to bring someone. Someone? My mother's eyebrows lifted. A date. I thought of Sophia, who had mentioned visiting Boston for an art exhibition in the fall. Possibly. Is that a problem? My parents exchanged glances, having one of their silent conversations. My father nodded slightly. No problem at all, my mother said with visible effort. We would be happy to meet your friend. It was a small victory but significant. I left the restaurant feeling cautiously optimistic, aware that rebuilding trust would take time and consistent effort on both sides. In the weeks that followed, I established a new relationship with my family, one defined by boundaries and honest communication rather than unspoken expectations. James remained distant, unwilling to relinquish his position as the perfect son by acknowledging any family dysfunction. His wife Samantha, however, began reaching out independently, curious about the changes in the Anderson dynamic. Patrick and I grew closer allies in the gentle revolution occurring within our family system. He sent me recordings of his piano practice improving week by week. I shared designs for a logo I was creating for his new pediatric practice, distinct from the medical group our father had selected. Most surprisingly, my father and I established a tentative tradition of monthly coffee meetings, just the two of us. During one such meeting in early fall, he asked a question that revealed how far we had come. Are you happy, Erika, with your life as it is now? I considered the question seriously, thinking about my growing design business, my expanding social circle, the weekend trips to Florence I was planning for the coming year. Yes, I answered truthfully. I'm happy with who I'm becoming. He nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. That's what matters then. 6 months after the Italy incident, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment to celebrate my latest professional achievement, a contract to redesign the visual identity of a major Boston arts organization. My apartment was filled with friends, colleagues, and, to my mild surprise, family. My mother complimented my space without a single suggestion for improvement. My father engaged in a lengthy conversation with my client about the business aspects of graphic design. Patrick arrived with Megan and their 2-month-old son named Alexander, rather than Robert, a choice that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. The highlight of the evening was introducing Sophia, visiting from Florence, as both my professional collaborator and something more personal. She was received with genuine warmth even by my mother, who admired her knowledge of Renaissance art. As I looked around at this gathering of my chosen and biological families, I reflected on how a single painful moment. Next week is just special. You being there would ruin that. Had catalyzed a complete transformation in my life. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been painful confrontations, tearful nights, and moments of doubt. But standing in my own space, surrounded by people who accepted me as I was, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice in refusing to remain invisible any longer. That special trip to Italy had indeed been transformative after all, just not in the way any of us had expected. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of finding self-worth resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family expectations and finding your authentic path. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. Thank you for listening, and may you always have the courage to clink your fork to your glass when necessary.